I was an exterminator, and my last job has driven me to an early retirement. That pretty much sums up this story. Have you ever seen those shows where they send in people in hazmat suits to clean up the crap-piled mountains of hoarded garbage? Well, yeah, that was me. On top of deep cleaning homes, I had the lovely job of exterminating swarms of pests that thrived in such conditions. I've seen things you wouldn't imagine. Bathtubs filled with roaches, living and dead, layered on top of each other like a crunchy, crawling lasagna. Oh, and there was this one time where me and my partner, Phil, went into a house with, and I quote, a small rat problem. Let me tell you, there was nothing small about them. They were like rats on roids. Phil even joked. He swore he saw one with the teardrop tattoo and a switchblade. I digress. The reason I'm telling you all of this is so that you can understand, so that you can tell that I'm just an average Joe. Literally, my name is Joe, and I'm a sane, straight-shooting, working-class bloke. That's important, you see, for what I'm about to tell you will make you question the validity of my writing, but I swear to you, this is the honest truth. About a week ago, we got a call for a job outside of Kansas. It was a little farmstead with an owner complaining about a vermin problem. Rats, no problem, I thought when Phil told me. I mean, having dealt with cat-sized droid rats, I was sure that I could handle whatever pests were running amok on a farm. Besides, Phil had assured me that this was going to be an easy job. I had no reason to think he'd be wrong. So, we went out to the home of the woman who called Mrs. Kettlewell. Across the arid wastes we drove, and upon driving up the dirt road, I could see it. A little farm with a crooked, crudely crafted windmill spinning slowly beside it. The place was quaint, like a dream of yesteryears that never were. It was the sort of place one could imagine as a backdrop to a black and white western, where troubles melted like lemon drops and twisters delivered you to far off and strange new worlds. However, there was something off about the place. From its fields of dried yellow grass and barren soil, to the enormous barn, its red paint faded and its interior empty of animals. The cogs began to spin in my head, and I found myself wondering, what kind of a farm is this if it doesn't have any animals or crops? Still, maybe they used to run it as a farm, but have retired it since, I told myself. Yeah, that seems logical to me. Maybe they ran it and had gotten too old to let it slip in disrepair. It happens. When we parked the van, I looked at the home ahead. It was a teetering two-floored structure, a gnarled, crudely constructed wooden homestead made of uneven planks and entirely stripped of its exterior painting, probably from a lifetime of being battered by harsh, sand-filled winds. You're not one of them salesmen or those who keep trying to take my home, a shrewd elderly voice squawked from the shadows of her porch. No, madam, we're from Squeaky Clean, the pest control and house cleaning service, Phil said, stepping his portly body up onto the porch, his large workman boots causing it to squeak as he did. Oh, of course you are. May I see him? You seem like a sweet young man. Are you here to deal with the vermin? The shriveled old lady asked, her toothless, wrinkled mouth grinning at Phil. I followed in Phil's wake and looked at the shrewd little old woman, all wrinkled up and wrapped in layers of knitted fabric. Yes, that's right. We came because of the rodent problem you've been having, I assured her. Looking at her with her small black glasses pressed into her face like goggles and the layers of knitted shrouds wrapped around her, I wondered if she was all there. Oh, there seems to be no end of them. They're everywhere these days, but lately they've been scampering in and out of my house as if they own it. They're always coming on my property, touching my things, and squeaking away. I've put down traps, but still they keep coming, trying to force me out, Mrs. Kettlewell exclaimed, her strange, rambling words bringing a smile to both mine and Phil's face. We were accustomed to the normal dementia-dented declarations of our more senile clientele. But the idea of some rat conspiracy was a new one. You couldn't do me a favor, could you, young man? Could you also check on the flies? Mrs. Kettlewell asked, a voice interrupting my daydreams of a William Wallace-styled rat rebellion. The flies? I shivered, having gotten flashbacks to this awful squat we had to clean a couple years back. No problem, Mrs. Kettlewell. We'll swat those flies and round up those rodents for you and have your home sparkling in no time. Phil chuckled in a charming corporate way. I'm too long in the tooth for you to patronize me, young man, she snapped, her calm and genteel manner slipping for a moment. Phil and I gave each other the "she's a spanner short of a toolbox" look as we cautiously planned our next phrases and replies. Anyways, I'll leave you boys to it. I'll be going to town to run some errands, but feel free to help yourself to what's in the pantry, the old woman said as she shuffled her way towards a dusty, beaten-up old banger parked on her dirt road drive. Oh, and one more thing. My son is sleeping in his room. He's not to be disturbed. Okay, Mrs. Kettlewell, I chimed back as we began our journey up into the house. That means don't enter his room. He gets very cross when that happens, she insisted, the words serious and stern, like a teacher chastising a pupil. We promise, Phil replied, trying his best not to annoy the feisty little old woman anymore. Then, in a hail of poisonous gas, the woman drove off. We could still hear the cracks of her car's engine sputter in the distance as we clad ourselves in gear and masked up. Then we did it. We peeled back the screen door and entered into the old woman's parlor. It was as bad as you could imagine. Cobwebs didn't just hang from the ceiling. They were practically part of it. The white strands were strewn across the room, knitting themselves together with the old wooden furniture and rat-bitten couch. The dust-heavy air was scented with the smell of stale winds and total neglect. But the kitchen was far worse. Upon stepping into the wretched room, we saw a wide breach in the floor, a plunge into the dark basement below. The counters were caked in layers of grime, and the fridge? Oh my God, the fridge. We opened it and out fell the Niagara Falls of maggots and other worming white things, wriggling in unison and undulating into the cracks between the floorboards. And you thought this job was going to be easy, I snickered at Phil, giving him a playful nudge. Yeah, don't you just love our job? Phil laughed. Suddenly, our laughter was startled by the sound of hurried feet scuttling through the wood above us. The pitter-patter of tiny feet was something we were familiar with, having been in plenty of rat-infested hovels. I'll deal with our furry-footed friends upstairs, and you can handle all of this, I said as I turned to leave. Oh, you're so kind, Phil said, shaking his head. Exiting the kitchen, I began, climbing up the termite-chewed steps, trying my best not to put too much weight on them, lest I fall straight through and end up in some god-forsaken rat's nest. Tap, tap, tap drummed the verminous sounds around the house. Their rhythmic tones a little off from the usual bouncy bounding of rats. However, rats were the least of my concerns. Once I placed my foot down on the top step, as I did, it hit me. The noxious odor. Earthy yet sour, like soil from a field watered with curdled milk. It was the putrid perfume of death, and I knew it well. When you've cleaned up as many scenes of death and murder, you get accustomed to the bitter rot that spills from the dead. Yet you never get over the dread I feared what might be waiting upstairs for me, knowing what the smell meant. With slow and cautious steps, I followed it until I came to a room at the far end of a creaky, crumbling hallway. I was sure this is where the smell was coming from, and solidifying this assumption, the sound buzzing behind the wooden membrane. The door behind me reverberated with the wing beat, an infinitesimal swarm. Now, with the smell and flies, my mind was quick to race towards the idea that I was about to step into a crime scene. I mean, that lady wasn't all there to begin with. Maybe she snapped and killed her son, or maybe he died of natural causes, and she just couldn't bear to part with his body. That theory filled me with revulsion and despair. I was used to cleaning up after the dead, but seeing one, especially a child, that thought chilled me to my bones. Still, I had a job to do, and Phil would love to see me chicken out so he could joke and howl at my expense. Readying my spray in hand and mustering up the courage to enter, I rushed in, slamming the door behind me. It was all black. Even the light from the outside was eclipsed by the black bodies buzzing upon the panes of glass. My visors were completely coated in them, and so, with no eyes to see, I unleashed noxious spray into the air, sending the swarm into a futile, frenzied flight. On I sprayed until their numbers began to die down. It didn't take long before they fell still, and though there was still a lot struggling on, I could finally wipe my visors clean and see the room. To my surprise, there was nothing out of place. I mean, it was an empty room. No clutter or hoard, no expired food or rotten corpses I had imagined. Relief washed over me, but then I heard it, the scuttling. This time, the tapping ran up the wall to the right, drumming an arachnid beat as it did. A shiver ran up my spine upon hearing the sound. No amount of experience in this kind of job can ever cure you of the fear of spiders. I mean, they're spiders. Creepy, eight-legged, hairy things that crawl into every tiny crevice or hole available. The idea freaks me out more than the thought of coming upon the body of a dead kid, to be honest. I dread to see how big the spiders are in here. I mean, they've got no shortage of food, I joke to myself. I often found that talking to myself helped me forget the fear of the little critters, but it didn't this time, as the heavy thumps of 8 feet clattered back down the wall. With trembling hands, I tried to just get on with my job. I laid down flypaper, practically wallpapering the room with it to get any surviving flies, and as I was placing one sheet down, my eyes caught the glimpse of a strange stain. Trailing down the wall was a browning leak of something. It was behind a torn piece of wallpaper, and it was clear the stain was larger than what I could see. I realized that I had missed it upon my first glance, because most of it was hidden behind the wallpaper of pink flowers which adorned the room. Something in me told me to peel the wallpaper back. I know I shouldn't have, but once I began, I couldn't stop. With one final tear, the wallpaper fell, and before my eyes, inches from my face, was a large, circular blob of browning splatter. I touched the wall. It was moist. So moist, my fingers almost spilled through it. And it struck me again, a gust of foul, festering fumes. There was something rotting. Perhaps there was a body, and I was simply in the wrong room, I thought. Despite my instincts telling me something was off, I elected to enter the room next door. Once I left the swarming spare room, I walked towards the adjacent room, and upon the door there was the phrase, "Henry's room," engraved into the wood. My mind returned to Mrs. Kettlewell's only request, and though a part of me should have been concerned with keeping it, I was more worried that her request was made so we would not discover the corpse of her son. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and let the door swing open. To my utter shock, what lay before me was the room of a small boy. Drawings adorned the walls, and there were boxes of action figures and a ceiling dotted with glow-in-the-dark stars. However, there was one problem, one irregularity to sight. Every inch, every shelf and wooden furnishing was tied together, knotted in a cascade of greenish-brown webbing. This webbing was unlike any spiders I had ever seen. It wasn't even like the cobwebs downstairs. It was thick, mucus-like, and it clung to everywhere, forming strange slime structures and weird worming nets. Entering, I began yanking down some of the sticky stuff, but it was pulling plaster from the ceiling and walls. So I stopped and prepared to use my spray. Maybe that would loosen the threads, I thought. It was around that time that I noticed that set atop a set of drawers were a series of photographs. Looking to the black and white pictures, I saw Mrs. Kettlewell, still old and wrinkled, but with her was a small, curly-haired boy. He looked no older than 11 in every picture, and was always cuddled up to her, shrouded in throws and sheets. They were odd pictures. Something about the way every part of the boy was wrapped up in a quilt. In every photo frame, it just struck me as strange. But then again, looking around the chamber of gangrenous webs, those photos were the least strange things about this house. The penny dropped, and the most obvious, the most striking thing imaginable finally dawned upon me. Mrs. Kettlewell was adamant that this room contained her son, and though he was held in the picture frames, I saw no sign of the boy among the repulsive entanglements of slime threads. I readied my spray and began unleashing its toxic torrent into the room. Pouring forth, the spray cut through the threads, causing them to sizzle and fall, spilling into puddles of puke-colored gunk. Scuttling suddenly ricocheted across the room, a frightened scampering, I thought, from a spider that was soon to snuff it. In my naivete and arrogance, I continued my fumigation, chasing the rattling vermin as it raced away from the bug-repellent chemicals. Spraying beneath the boy's bed, I struck whatever it was, causing the thing to unleash a screech. Never in my worst or weirdest nightmares had I ever heard a sound like it. A bitter, biting wail sound that roared like a cougar and hissed like a diamondback. Stunned by the noise, I stopped spraying, giving the creature the opportunity it needed. Scrambling behind the wardrobe, its legs skidded up the wood, knocking the wardrobe down as it rambled up its back. Fractured, rotten strands and clouds of dust filled the room, but when the debris cleared, I saw that behind the wardrobe was a great gaping hole. What kind of spider was that? I fretted. It had to be a rat. Surely, I told myself. Only something big could have knocked that wardrobe over. But then, if it wasn't a spider, what had created the vile vines of sickly silk which infested the room? Come on, you've got a job to do. It's just a bug. You've dealt with bugs before, I've said, trying to psych myself up. But it wasn't working. Trembling, I picked up my spray and I stepped through the man-sized cavity in the wall, carrying in with me the heavy canister. Cautiously, I walked through the dizzying, twisted interior of the walls, trying not to slip or miss as she dropped down. Like Henry's room, the space between was thick with an otherworldly, grotesque gossamer. Slowly I trudged, weaving through the sticky strands, till that smell, that fetid, disgusting reek hit me once more. It was stronger in here. It was all I could smell. Every breath I took was a lung full of pestilent perfume. I didn't have time to worry about choking on the stench, though, for something had caught my eyes. In the webs ahead, I found something out of place. A card from a realtor. Beside it hung another card, this time from a law firm, and next to that, a card for another real estate agent. Looking around, these cards littered the place. Not just law firms or real estate agents either. Plumbers, babysitters, even pest control. Strange that there should be so many. Stranger still, that they should be held between the walls. Then I saw them, clinging to sticky strands, entombed and partially cocooned in greenish-brown were bodies. Dozens of them. I gasped in horror. Realtors, salesmen, lawyer types, still wearing their fancy suits. They were strung up like parcels of goop. They were rotten, dissolving in a soup of themselves, dripping and seeping into every fiber and splinter. They were the smell. The brown stuff of the wall, that was them, melting away, rotting between the crooked panels and thin drywall. I let out a howl, bellowing out for Phil, but the moment I did, I heard it. The cracking of joints, the movements of many legs. To my horror, my eyes caught a glimpse of something. Atop one of the maggot-crawling corpses appeared a shape. Lunging forth, the ghastly spider slashing through the air with biting fangs and crawling legs. I ducked and ran, swiftly swerving through the webbing, evading each and every clawing sweep of the spider's arms. Listening as I ran, all I could hear was the urgent and hungry scampering of the spider's legs, bounding from wall to wall, closing in on me with every step. In the darkness, it was hard to see, but I knew that thing was far too large to be a normal spider. It was something else, something monstrous. Those ethereal webs were spun from an otherworldly material, and the murderous hunger that drove that thing had come from some eldritch realm far from our famished thoughts. I dare not dream from whence it crawled, only focusing on the path ahead as I sprinted on. Pounding out of the murk of the wall cavity, I stumbled back and watched as leg by leg it emerged from the hole. With a sinister slowness, it crept out from the shadows. Each leg was as long as a meter, murky green and the color of rot. Every limb was armor-plated in a segmented foul carapace, spiked and thorned with long, black, spiny hairs. However, the spidery limbs were not the worst reveal, for as it pulled itself forth from the shadows, all color left my skin, and all my bravery with it. Thundering, my heart almost tore itself from my chest as fear turned my bones and muscles to stone. before me was not a spider. It had the legs of one, but its body was no arachnid. It had a head, the head of a boy. Specifically, the boy from all Mrs. Kettlewell's photographs. This monstrosity was Henry. Though it appeared like a severed head, the grinning child's aberrant appearance had no neck, and out of its head grew the hideous spider legs upon which it scuttled. There was no order to their positioning. Some bore out of his crown, others out of his ears or the back of his head. With wicked delight, his pale face spoke not a word from his dirty blackened mouth. Instead, its poisonous smile opened its jaws wide and revealed hundreds of curved gray-fanged teeth. In a flash, it snapped forward, jumping clean across the room, and when I went to run towards the door, it jumped right in front of me. Fumbling away, I slipped on a puddle of slime, and it scuttled with such swiftness that I damn near died of fright. In that moment, though, something took over, and I suddenly remembered I had my bug spray. Squeezing the trigger, I cast forth a geyser of pesticidal liquid, drenching the thing in it. Henry cursed and screeched in screaming sounds as he struggled and stumbled and recoiled from me. For a moment, I thought I had beaten him, but after slinking beneath the bed, that abominable child shook the liquid off of himself and prepared to attack me once more. Standing up, I raised my spray gun, but this time, streams of green gunk spewed from his eyes and mouth. These pestilent rivers of blackenwood netted up my spray and canister, sweeping them far into the wall beside me. I found myself disarmed and at Henry's mercy as the spidery child crawled out from beneath his bed. Gingerly, he stepped, foot by foot, inch by inch, easing himself towards me like a lion ready to pounce upon some hapless antelope. This time, as he charged forward, mouth chomping with feverish fangs, I jumped aside and hit the wall beside me. Seizing the chance, I ran faster than ever before. Clearing the few meters between myself and the door, I escaped the room and slammed the wooden barrier shut on his face. Bounding down the stairs with no concern for their termite-chewed condition, I began calling out for Phil, but he didn't answer. Phil! Come on, man, we have to go! We have to go now! I cried out with panicked sweat running down my forehead. I told you not to go into his room. An all too familiar, shrewd voice croaked from the corner of the room. Turning my anxious eyes towards the solitary chair in the corner of the living room, I saw Mrs. Kettlewell, shrouded in webs and in cloth, her fingers plaited in yellowish carapace. You're just like the rest of the vermin, always coming in here, trying to move me out or steal my land. Upsetting my dear darling Henry, Mrs. Kettlewell sneered, her greenish-gray fangs suddenly on display. Emerging from a hole in the wall beside her came the hideous, eight-legged head of Henry. At least with the others, Henry wouldn't go hungry, but you denied him even that, choosing to hurt my dear Henry. That won't do, she chirped, a voice wobbling into a crickety tone. Are you going to kill me? I stammered. Dearie me, no, you'll live. You have to. You have to tell the rest of the pests out there not to step foot on my property again. That's why I called you. You'll be my messenger. Of course, don't go telling everyone to stay away. Henry and I are still hungry from time to time. She grinned as she ran her spidery finger through her son's curly hair. What about Phil? I asked, my feet already edging towards the door. Oh, I'm sorry. I was a little peckish after a long day of shopping. He really was a sweet young man. Miss Kettlewell smiled, her lips salivating and wide. Without any further word between us, I sprinted and noped straight out of that place. I'm sorry, Phil. Sorry I left you there. Be another stain on the wall, or a bad smell that just won't go away. But I had to get out of there. I had to tell people, if you get the call to go to that house, or if you cross paths with anyone called Mrs. Kettlewell, don't be fooled by her kindly old lady act. She's a monster, and to her, we're the vermin.